Yeah, Changan is a very old company. We've got a history of about 160 years as a trading company. As a car company, started in the 1980s, making contract manufacturing in China for other car companies primarily. But really since the 1990s we've been growing our own business, growing up our own range of cars, and now we are, actually I saw us on one of Andrew's charts, one of the leading manufacturers of electric vehicles, but we manufacture a whole range of other vehicles as well, and sold about 3 million cars last year. So over the history of Changan, we've sold about 30 million cars. So one of the world's biggest car companies, but as you say, not that well known in the UK and Europe yet. And actually that's something that I really want to change, because actually Changan is a great UK success story. In the 1990s, when the leadership of Changan were putting together the strategy to become this global automotive company, they said, okay, we know how to make cars, we can do production and manufacturing and quality and all of those things, but we want to be a global powerhouse. So we need the best engineers, the best powertrain engineers in the world to make the best cars, and we need the best designers in the world to make attractive cars. And where are they? So they said, okay, well, the best powertrain engineers in the world are in the West Midlands in the UK. So they set up in the early 2000s an R&D centre in Birmingham. Actually, first of all in Nottingham and then in Birmingham. And there's more than 100 engineers working there, have been there for more than 15 years. And those engineers are responsible for the R&D for more than 80–90% of the vehicles that Changan has actually sold around the world. So those 30 million vehicles, most of that technology comes from engineers in the West Midlands, and actually I think some of them are in the audience today. And similarly, design. We have a design centre in Turin with about 300 designers, which has been open for more than 20 years. And our first cars that we're selling in Europe have all been designed in Italy. And that's a big reason for the growth of Changan as a global organisation.
So what's the ambition now that you're in charge over here?
The ambition is to become a significant player in the European and the UK automotive business. We've launched our first 2 cars. We've taken a slightly different approach perhaps than some of the other new entrants into the market. I've been with Changan actually more than 2 years. I was the first commercial employee in Europe, and I've been hiring a team around Europe and in the UK. And we've been very carefully and diligently building up our business before we launched. So we've already set up at the R&D centre in Birmingham. The engineers have done a huge amount of work to adapt the cars to the UK. Roads are very different. Driving standards are very different. Within 3 months of getting the first cars over here, they'd done a full recalibration of the suspension, a full assessment, redesign, put it into production, which in automotive terms is staggering that you can do that in 3 months, but they can, and they do it with consistently extremely high levels of quality. Software systems, ADAS systems, the safety systems, which are really important on modern cars, critical for getting the Euro NCAP 5-star ratings that we've got. But also done badly are very intrusive and very disruptive to customers. And often, I particularly see media get into a car and the very first thing they want to do is switch everything off. In our cars, you don't need to do that because they've been properly calibrated. So they're there to protect you without constantly distracting you, constantly annoying you. So there's a lot of work that's been done there. And then we set up a technical diagnosis centre, a dealer training centre. We set up a dealer network. We've got more than 55 dealers around the UK now. About 35 of those are open, 20 are in the stages of opening. So we've got a nationwide dealer network of really big dealer partners, lots of very trusted groups. We're now rolling out our models. We've launched our Changan Deepal SO7, which is a larger BEV car, which we launched just end of last year, and now we're launching the Changan Deepal SO5 this week actually, which is a C-segment BEV, and we've got many more cars to come as well.
When we were talking about this session, and we were talking about the title, it says how EVs and vehicle tech can redefine personal mobility. That sounds like quite a sort of a evangelical sort of philosophy, if you like. Are you really saying that people, with the cars that you're designing, that the electric vehicles gives an opportunity to sort of change the driving experience completely or change people's relationship with cars?
I think it was more a reflection of the way that the industry is changing, and we've heard a huge amount about that today. Personally, I'm very optimistic about that change. I was listening to some of my former colleagues. I've worked at both at Ford and at Nissan in my career, and I've been a huge advocate for electric vehicles for more than 10 years. To answer Martin's first question from the first presentation this morning, who realised that in 2012 that electric cars would be such a big part of the industry? Well, certainly Nissan Renault did. I would say the Chinese industry did as well, and they've invested very, very strongly in the value chains, as we heard from Andrew, in materials, but particularly in technology and integrating that technology. And listening to the panel, and Peter, who is also a former colleague of mine, talking passionately about the potential for V2G and creating an ecosystem around electric vehicles. It's not just about switching taking a combustion engine out and putting a battery and a motor in. It's about, well, how can we actually integrate renewable energy through electric vehicles? How can we integrate renewable energy into an ecosystem? How can we use V2G and the things you were hearing about, what we call in the industry a duck curve, where you've got those peaks of demand at 6 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the evening, but a real surplus of supply in the middle of the day, the middle of the night. How can we use battery technology, which is already here, to actually solve lots of the challenges of moving to a renewable energy economy? And that is a great opportunity for all of us, and that's what I think we as an industry should be embracing.
And is that part of Changan's strategy at the moment, to try and integrate, look at the bigger picture, if you like?
I think it would be a bit arrogant of us to say that we can do that by ourselves today. We're obviously a tiny player in the UK today, but we have big ambition, and globally we're a big player. We believe very strongly in sustainability. We believe very strongly in new energy vehicles, in battery electric as a huge part of the approach to how we approach the climate crisis. So I'm not going to say we can change the world by ourselves, but yes, we are big believers in let's all work together and integrate battery electric vehicles into the energy ecosystem properly. As you've heard from other people, the big secret of cars is that people buy them to park them. Yes, we all use them to get around, but they spend almost all of their time parked. And some of the challenges that we've heard from Lisa and Nicole and others who are really took a customer eye view of I want to get an electric vehicle, but actually I don't have I don't have somewhere to charge it. Well, there's a lot of things we can do to solve those problems by massively expanding low-cost, low-level charging in employee car parks, or in supermarkets, or in places where we spend time. I don't want a huge expansion in super high power chargers on motorways. I think that job is already well underway. But I'm a huge believer in destination charging. Whenever, if I drive, if I get in my car and I drive to 300 miles, I want to be able to charge while I'm in my business meeting, or while I'm on my family day out, or while I'm doing something else. I don't want to think about it. And that's a great opportunity to level the playing field, to overcome some of the inequality that there is in EV adoption today, by doing that. But equally, most people are not driving 300 miles. They're driving 10 miles or 15 miles to work. And that's, the average person is driving, 50 miles a week. So you're arriving with a nearly full battery. That's a great opportunity to share that energy, to share that capacity, and equally to share that, to use that battery in your car to power your home, to even out some of those things. So I think there's huge opportunities there if we can all work together. But the challenge is to overcome some of those regulation blockers, some of those planning blockers, and to create that, to share out the benefits as well.
It was very interesting hearing what you were saying about Changan having had such a big British presence for some decades now on the engineering R&D side. Can you share what their current plans are for investment in the UK sector?
Yeah, certainly. So as I said, the R&D centre is now my home, and my team are based there. So we've hired another 40-odd people, and we're hiring many more people to keep growing the commercial side of the business. But it's also now our European engineering hub. So for a long time, the engineering teams in Birmingham have been doing research and development projects for engines to be sold in China, in Southeast Asia, in the Middle East, where Changan is very strong. But now also all of that adaptation of vehicles that we bring to Europe, all of that will be done by our local engineering team. So we're hiring more people there. And while it's not UK specific yet, across Europe, Changan has committed to more than 2 billion euros of investment by 2030. So we're investing in more people. So we've opened another design and engineering centre for our Avatar brand in Munich. We're expanding the design centre in Italy as well. And of course, we're actively looking at manufacturing options around Europe. And we'll have local manufacturing within the next couple of years as well.
There is, of course, I mean, that slide was very striking earlier, wasn't it, with all the different Chinese brands. There's a growing recognition, of course, of the increasing dominance of Chinese brands in this sector and indeed in the UK market. Are we a little bit in danger of oversimplifying things, do you think, and thinking that all Chinese EVs are equal? Or are we going to have to get sophisticated about differentiating pretty sharpish?
Absolutely. I mean, I wouldn't quite use the word dominance yet or ever. I think the market is very dynamic. The market's always been dynamic. We've all seen, you know, those of us who've been around. I've been in the. I used to share an office with Lisa Brankin, and you know, we've been around a very long time. We've seen a big change in this market. There's another big change happening, but that doesn't have to be exclusive to any one country. You know, I've worked in this industry, as I said, for a long time. I've always worked in teams which have employed a lot of people in the UK, have created a lot of value in the UK. But actually, none of the companies I've ever worked for have been UK owned in that sense. And China is the next incomer. But the brands that will be successful are the ones that invest in the markets where they want to be. Present, and that's always been true whether I worked at Ford or whether I worked at Nissan or now when I work at Changan. We will be successful by investing in the right people, the right technologies, the right local infrastructure, and being part of a community, and people will recognise that. Sorry, I've not really answered your question, but yes, there is a huge range of brands coming from China. And I don't, you know, everything from the cheapest cars like Leap Motors and those through to super premium brands, our own premium brand Avatar. If anybody's seen that triangle that does the rounds on LinkedIn with all of the Chinese brands stacked up, you know, we've got, as Changan, we have Avatar, which is our super high tech right at the top of that pyramid, through to Deepal, which is sort of super premium, if they call it, super mainstream, and then Changan, which is our mainstream brand. We're trying to simplify that in terms of the customer, in terms of the way that we actually approach the market. So we just talk about Changan. We keep everything together in one place. So our dealerships are Changan, our brand is Changan, all of our communications, all of our models are called Changan, because we think it's a bit too much to bring in 3 or 4 brands at once, and the Chinese relationship to brand is quite different. But you do have a range of manufacturers offering a range of different products across the market, and
let me just pick up on that. In what way is the Chinese attitude to brand different?
So China, I don't pretend to fully understand it, but what I've learned is that you know, the average customer in China, for example, is probably in their late 20s or 30 or early 30s, probably getting into their first car. Whereas the average customer in the UK is probably in their mid-50s and older, and they're often in a cycle of PCP and balloon finance. And so in China, there's a real push for newness. And you know, some of the things that people in Europe don't like about cars, you know, the fact that we're taking away switches and buttons and stalks and everything is becoming screen. Actually, that's driven by the younger people in China who see that as a sign of advancement. But for Europe, it's really important that people still have switch gear, that they can still feel tactile things, that they have control. And in China, it tends to be, there's a new technology, great, okay, let's put a new badge on it. And it's not quite a brand, it's just a new logo. So most of the big Chinese car companies have multiple badges, multiple brands. But that's not how things work in Europe. So that's exactly the reason that we focused and simplified, and we're just presented as Changan, and we will bring almost all of our products. Avatar may stand alone, but we'll bring almost all of our products under one simple brand, because brand matters in Europe. You need to build trust. People need to know that you're here for the long term, that if they buy their car or if they lease their car for 3 or 4 or 5 years, they need to know that they're going to be able to get it serviced. They need to know that you know what you're doing. A lot of what we've been doing is working with the insurance industry, working with the parts industry, making sure that we have in place everything that's needed to repair our car before we supply it to a customer, and trying to convince the insurance industry that we've done all of the right things. And I've been doing that with my team for the last couple of years. It takes time.
The point raised by our question earlier, that you've got the trained staff to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's really important.
Yeah.
And that builds trust for a customer, and those things are very important in Europe.
So interesting hearing about the launch of a new brand, not new brand.
Well, yes, yeah.
Like this.
It's challenging, certainly.
Questions, please, for Nick. The hand just gone up in the middle there on the right. Thank you.
Hello, Ian Flynn, Invest Coventry in Warwickshire. Interested in your comments on localisation of production and sites. We'd certainly be very happy to speak to you in the West Midlands, but there's lots of other sites in the UK. And just on another related point, I suppose, I went to the FPC conference about 2.5 years ago, and at the time we thought Changan were real outliers, because the two guys on the stage were talking about the role of hybrid and how much of the powertrain in China was being designed in the West Midlands. But I think
one of those guys is sat behind you.
Yeah, recent history I think has proved you quite prescient.
Not me, but them. I'm a newcomer.
Yeah. Thank you. But yeah, very, very keen to hear more about localised production.
And we will have news in the fullness of time. We're currently going through a selection process for what's the right place to build or to take over a existing operation or those sorts of things. But we don't have full news on that yet.
Hoping for a scoop, but no, not yet.
Sorry.
Any more questions? Yes, gentleman here at the front.
Hi there, thanks a lot. It's David Dent from Crow. This morning, I think we kind of felt a bit there was a certain amount of negativity coming from the legacy OEMs and talking to struggling to hit ZEV mandates because the consumer wasn't ready. But there seems to be a very different attitude from the Chinese brands coming into the UK. A lot more positivity around being able to convert people into EVs. Why is that?
You'd have to ask the legacy OEMs why they are negative about it. I worked for a legacy OEM that was very, very positive about it because it saw that trend a long, long time ago, started that trend, and has been a huge force in driving that change. And now I work for a different part of the automotive industry that similarly saw that trend and embraced it. I don't think it's helpful for an OEM to sit here and say everything's very difficult. I think it's our job to create really exciting cars that people want to drive, make them accessible for them, and to help. There are very real challenges for some people in adopting an EV. That's very, very clear. But there's also an awful lot of people for whom it's just a brilliant choice. I'm very fortunate. I have off-street parking. I can charge my car at home. I can get in the morning. I can drive 300 miles non-stop. It's not a good idea, but I do it sometimes. And then I can plug in my car when I get to often a car dealership, and then I can go and do something else. That is a fantastic option for a huge, huge number of people. We've heard different numbers, and it's interesting. We've all got a different number, but whether it's 40 or 50 or 60% of people in the UK that can do that, that's fantastic for them. And my job is to provide, you know, really great vehicles that are really accessible for them to do that. I think, you know, as an industry and as a government as an industry and government, we need to unlock all those other challenges for all those people who aren't that fortunate. There's a lot of inequality in EV adoption. Not just whether you actually have access to charging, but the cost of that charging is a huge issue for a lot of people as well. And I'm hugely supportive of trying to unlock those challenges so that firstly, you know, those people can access new cars, but actually that's going to be increasingly important for used cars, which typically are, you know, for people on lower incomes who are probably less likely to have access to those, you know, the advantages that I've got. But that should not stop us in moving forward. And I'm a huge fan of EVs. I have been for many, many years. They're just they're more fun to drive. They're easier to drive. They're easier to maintain. They're lower cost. If you're part of the fortunate 50%, they're lower cost. We need to make them easier and lower cost for the other 50% of the country. But that should not stop us moving forward fast.
Thank you.